a great quote. Who came up with this one? A guy named Devereux referred to primitive religion as being organized schizophrenia. This was somebody in the 1940s exactly getting this flavor of contextualized, appropriate, hearing the voices at the right time, all of that. But this was overwhelmingly literature about the weird stuff those folks are up to in the night and the Time Life specials on public television. And what the critical transition is it's not just about them. At some point, this anthropologist Ackerneck, who was quite leftist in his orientation, wrote a long essay saying how incredibly culturally chauvinistic it was of the West and anthropologists to write all these articles about how shamans are half-healed madmen, and how condescending that was to talk about those cultures as being so irrationally based in contrast to us. And what's the obvious punchline is, the problem isn't saying that they're irrational when we're saying that we aren't, but it's saying that we're equally irrational. We are equally irrational in some of the tenets that we have here. A quote from Ackerneck at the time was, "Our culture is unique in outlawing the irrational." Let me give you some recent statistics from a survey. What's the name of the survey? The Maine National Survey people. Who? Yes, Gallup poll, that guy. The Gallup poll, a recent Gallup poll survey. I don't know about you guys, but these numbers astonished me. 25% of Americans say they believe in ghosts. 36% believe in mental telepathy, 47% believe in UFOs, and more than 50% of Americans believe in the devil and a belief that the devil influences daily activities. These are people who can vote. These are people who can serve on juries. These are people who can operate motor vehicles. These are people making decisions about medical interventions. I, for one, in this outpost of not terribly extreme irrationality in this corner of the country, am astonished. We live in a world that is highly irrational. And the punchline of this is not simply about non-Western traditional human societies. The exact same thread of schizotypalism runs throughout all of the belief systems of human societies, including Western ones. We are permeated by irrationality. Now, some of the versions of it that we have in the West are utter nonsense ones that have just been like invented out of thin air in recent years, which is kind of like fast food for these sort of nouveau, sort of medieval peasants in their hot tubs up in Marin. This is the world of crystals and channeling and things of that sort. But some of the versions of our westernized irrationality go back millennia and organize some of our most cherished values. The same irrationality and the same valuing of those who invent the appropriate versions of the irrationality runs throughout the West. Okay, just to show you that I'm not being overly hostile, or will try to pull in my own sort of tradition that I was raised in, it is not normally considered a sign of robust mental health to hear voices coming out of burning bushes. This is considered a worrisome sign. This is considered diagnostic. It is not a good thing to be reporting that you just spent the night wrestling an angel. It is usually a very disturbing sign if you were reporting you've had a conversation with someone who is dead and has risen from the grave. These are diagnosable problems in our secular Western realm. These are the backbones of our belief systems, we in the West as well as we humans in non-Westernized settings. Schizotypalism runs through all of human history. What you wind up having then is this obvious question: who invented this stuff? Who came up with the notion that the world was invented in 7 days, or snakes with apples are up to something no good, or it's possible to give birth and you're still a virgin? These were not designed by committees. These were designed by extremely formative, extremely influential schizotypals throughout history. Yeah?
How do we explain the need for shamans? What is it?
Okay, why do we need this? Why do we value this? Okay, we'll come to this probably in about 2 days, but this is tapping into all of the, why do we search for some fairly unlikely answers to the big questions that plague all of us? We'll come to this in 2 days. But, this is getting at the core of some of the basic questions here. Okay, let me push on here. What you wind up seeing with this is that this is on a continuum, and who invented this stuff? And you look throughout the history of religious leaders, those who have invented some of the theology, and we will come to different variants of religious leaders shortly, as you see those who invented the theology, that there is very often a thread of metamagic metamagical thinking that goes through this. And this is metamagical thinking of a type that falls readily into the spectrum of schizotypalism. Now, one of the themes we've endlessly come back to in this class is appropriate context, and this is a perfect realm to see this, because what we wind up getting is you got to get it just right. If you hear voices, it's got to be during the ceremony. If you're speaking in tongues, it can't be in the middle of the silent part of the hunt. You don't want to have too many of them. Thank God we've got this shaman, but not two of them around here. You've got to get the context right. And what we've seen throughout human history, and Western history as well, is get it wrong, and we have names for these things. Get it wrong, and these are abortive religious fringe groups. These are cults, and you look at some versions of this in our own recent time. You look at David Koresh in Waco. You look at someone like Jim Jones in Jonestown. You look at someone like Charles Manson, and these are people who were highly metamagical in their thinking, highly charismatic, but hit a wall at the point where we still classify them as cults. Manson is a diagnosed schizophrenic. With the other two, there's only post hoc sort of forensic psychiatry that you can do. What you wind up getting is get it wrong, and we call it a cult. Get it right in the right time and the right place, and maybe for the next couple of millennia, people won't have to go to work on your birthday if you get it exactly right in that setting. So what I think we see here is a setting here for making sense, the exact same traits in a different context, to use Kroeber's words, in a cultural context that is not sanctioned. The exact same traits count as psychiatrically suspect these days. What this is about is not only, if you get it in the right context, is it okay, it is highly honored, tapping into the question that came in before, that all human societies have a strong need for a certain degree of these folks around. You need to get the ratios right. Okay, picking up on this theme, a transition to a next point. In a sense, this is talking about sort of the structural steel of religious belief. What are the basic beliefs you have? There's no God but one. He is Allah. Whatever versions of the central formats you have. There is a Trinity. I am who I am. Any of these variants, these are sort of the building blocks, the structural steel of religion. But what religion is often also about is lots of other things. We have a very modern, very westernized view of religion these days. What religion is often about is the social community that it brings you. What religion is often about is the motivation for good works. Throughout most of history, what religion is about in one very orthodox variant is the carrying out of rituals, the daily performance of ritualistic behaviors in the context of religion. And this transitions us to the next subject in here. And this whole notion of ritualism as a backbone of religion, wonderful quote to that effect. Henry Ward Beecher, father of Harriet Beecher Stowe, famous Protestant preacher in New England, I think the 1830s or so, had this quote at the time, religion is daily bread. Religion is not just cake on Sunday. The notion that what religion is about is the small acts. God is in the detail. Religion is in the small acts of the daily rituals, now beginning to look not at the large theological notions. Our religion believes there are multiple gods, there are virgin births, that God can speak through a burning bush, but instead religion as the daily practices of ritual. Now, what is interesting about this? What comes through with this is another theme, another subtype of a very mild version of a psychiatric disorder, which once again works spectacularly when you get it just right, not now with the metamagical big theology building blocks of religion, but the daily bits and pieces of ritualism. And this brings in another psychiatric disorder.